Good evening, everyone. Pranam Swamiji, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on this very important and relevant topic of sustainability. The problem of environmental sustainability is not new for Hindu tradition. Hindu tradition literature is replete with examples, concepts, applications promoting reverence for nature. And one of this important sacred text for Hindus in this regard is Bhagavad Gita. So in this particular presentation, we have divided this presentation in two parts. First part, I will be dealing with the criticism raised by Lance Nelson regarding the verses of Bhagavad Gita and other Hindu philosophies, stating that these philosophies are responsible for environmental degradation. And the second part, which will be presented by Professor Jain, who will explain that the principles of Bhagavad Gita are seen as the foundation for ecological development. So I will start with the first part of my presentation and I will share my PPT here. So starting with this verse, chapter 5 of 18th verse of Bhagavad Gita, which talks about that the same reality, same being is present in all the same reality is present in all the beings, whether it is Brahmin, cow, dog, or an outcast. So he highlighted the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravartin, who said that that Brahmins and cow are considered as beings alike, whereas the dogs and an outcast, they are at the bottom level. So and the another verse from chapter 15 of Gita, that is 16 to 18, it also highlights, it is Nelson's view that it highlights the importance of spiritual self and not ecological self. It is basically Bhagavad Gita talks about spirituality, spiritual self, and not ecological self, nothing relevant to ecology. So to this, my response to this criticism is that there is this concept of samdarshina in Bhagavad Gita where the learned, who is a realized soul, he sees all beings alike, whether it is a cow or a Brahmin or a dog, because he is a realized soul. He is not able to discriminate whether it is a human being or an animal or so. This responding to the criticism by Nelson. So this is the concept of pragnya chakshu, where the learned sees all beings alike. The next criticism raised by Nelson is regarding the chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, which is the verse 17, 20, and 24, where he highlighted and raised the question that whether this immortality of soul, is immortality of soul justify human killing or any kind of killing? So in this context, my response will be that Bhagavad Gita talks about righteous battle. As an individual, you have a dharma, you have to perform your duty. So in that context, even if an Arjuna fight because it was his duty as a warrior. So I respond to this criticism in this manner. Next verse, chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita and verse number 10, 11, 12, and also chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita and verse 10. It also, Nelson said that it considered Krishna as an ultimate reality and not this physical nature, not a nature in the environment, in relation to the environment. So basically it is the soul, it is Krishna who is considered as sacred and not the physical nature. So again, my response to this criticism is basically Krishna is seen in the cosmic form, which includes in all the aspects of universe, whether it is plants, animals, rivers, mountains, so everything. So this Vishwaroop, the Vishwaroop of Krishna is highlighted. Next verse, chapter 18, verse number 66 of Bhagavad Gita, Nelson criticized by claiming that Bhagavad Gita is all about moksha. Basically, dharma is seen in relation to moksha, concept of moksha. So it is a moksha oriented and not dharma, or whether you see the social problems or not. So that is not considered. So again, in response to this criticism, basically Bhagavad Gita talks about moksha and also dharma in relation to the social problems. It is not saying abandonment of all dharma. You are an individual, you have a swadharma, you have to perform your duty. Next, criticism which is raised by Lance Nelson, is regarding the 54 verse of chapter 2, which highlights the concept of sthit prajna. So basically, in this verse, Nelson said that Gita talked about this concept as, indifference. Then you are indifferent to all kinds of social problems. You don't take part in social activity, and you are indifferent to any kind of social problem. So in responding to this criticism, I want to highlight the importance of the response of Arjuna, where he was inspired to rebel against his elders, and then he was not indifferent to any social problem. But in this concept, Bhagavad Gita highlights that the ego of the actor, that should be suppressed, that should not be there, but not your action. So that actor, that role of ego should not be there, but you need to perform your action, you need to have your swadharma. Next verse, chapter 5 of 19 verse, which talks about this, which Nelson highlights, is that nature is conquered to establish in Brahman. That means you need to overcome nature in order to realize Brahman. But basically, this is again a wrong interpretation of Nelson's reading, where it is not that you need to conquer nature, it is you need to conquer your own nature, individual nature. So it is controlling your nature, and not not in terms of ecological dominion. So these are the verses which were criticized by Lance Nelson in his article, in his readings. Next part will be explained by Professor Jain, where he will highlight the importance of the principles of Bhagavad Gita, which are taken as a foundation of these ecological movements in India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shikha. Pranam Swamiji. Thank you, everybody. And this is my first time attending the peace conference that has been organized by Swamiji for many years. And thank you to Shikha to connect me with Swamiji. Right. So as she was sharing these Bhagavad Gita verses, now Lance Nelson is a professor in University of San Diego in California, and he has also similarly criticized Adi Shankaracharya and Advait Vedant. But today we are just focusing on the Bhagavad Gita. So first part, she shared some verses and how Lance Nelson has misinterpreted some verses. Now I want to show you the positive interpretation that has been taken by many Hindu leaders over centuries. About a century ago, in 1942, Pandurang Shastri Athavale, also widely known as Dadaji, he started the movement called as the Swadhyay Parivar, or Swadhyay movement in English. And the movement started, this work started when Dadaji started giving pravachans, discourses on Rig Veda, Upanishad, and the Bhagavad Gita. And as he kept giving these discourses over the years, his early audience, those who were listening to him over the years, they got so inspired that they took his message, and based on the Bhagavad Gita's message of global brotherhood, they started going to the remote villages across Gujarat, Maharashtra, across India, and eventually across the world. Swadhyay Parivar expanded across the world. And some of the basic teachings that he shared with his followers in Swadhyay Parivar were all based on the Vedantic teachings of the indwelling God, that is, same divinity exists in every particle of the universe, which comes from Advait Vedant, which also is in the Bhagavad Gita. Then devotion as social force, which means bhakti ek samajik shakti hai. Based on the bhakti aspect of Bhagavad Gita, he inspired his followers, his listeners to go and develop this global family, based on global fraternity, based on spirituality. That was also called, in his words, devotional activism, which means Kriti Bhakti. We all do bhakti in sitting in the meditation, sitting in temples, sitting inside our homes. But how can we make bhakti in that can uplift society also, that can uplift society based on spirituality? So that was his mission in his life. He passed away in 2003, but before he passed away, he was able to establish this global parivar across India, across the world, including US and Canada and England and elsewhere, and Africa and elsewhere. So, so same Bhagavad Gita, as Nelson also mentions, that same Bhagavad Gita can be taken, can be interpreted in a good way, even in a non-violent way by Mahatma Gandhi. And even Nathuram Godse was also inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. So in this presentation, we showed you how Nelson himself took some verses of Gita and took it in a different way. But Dadaji took it in a positive way, and not just Dadaji, but his followers, his millions of followers, those who practice Svadhyaya, have been taking this message in a very positive way to help the society and help nature. So this is one quotation from one of the Dadaji's pravachans that I have translated from Gujarati, Hindi, or Marathi. I think this is from Hindi pravachan. So he calls for reverence for all based on Advait Vedanta. The acceptance of the principle of the immanence of God not only generates reverence for self, reverence for other selves, but also reverence for the whole creation. This attitude towards nature is nobler than the purely utilitarian attitude, which leads to wanton destruction of nature and exploitation of biological resources. Most of the ecological problems can be solved if one develops reverential attitude towards nature. So reverence for all, which comes from Albert Schweitzer also in Christian theology, but here Dadaji takes it and connects it with spiritual philosophy of Advait Vedanta and inspires his followers to uplift masses and to take care of the natural resources. So as Majid Rahnuma, Iraq diplomat from Iran, when he came to see Svadhyaya work, he coined this term called silent singing revolution. Most Indians were and still are not really aware of the Svadhyaya Parivar's massive work in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and across the world. So Majid Rahnuma called this revolution as silent but singing revolution. It is silent because it's not much known outside Svadhyaya Parivar, because it's rarely covered by the media, but yet it is singing revolution, because the impact of this revolution, based on spirituality, based on Vedanta, based on the Bhagavad Gita, results are just breathtaking and really at a massive level. So the work started with devotional visits by Svadhyaya people across India. Then they created socio-spiritual shrines in which people from different castes used to take turn. They take turn and they take care of their temple and the rituals, not just Brahmins, but everybody is welcome to become Pujari or Pujarin. Ocean worship is being done in the coastal areas of Gujarat and Maharashtra. Dairy industry is taken care of based on the same philosophy of Advait Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. Tree temples or Vriksha Mandirs are created across Gujarat and Maharashtra. Farms of God, Yogeshwar Krishi, have been done at a massive level based on the same idea of divinity of the earth, divinity of the plants, and divinity of the soil. Water harvesting has been done not just as rainwater harvesting, not just as an environmental work, but again as a spiritual work, as a Vedantic work. Water harvesting is also Vedanta philosophy in action. When you do farming, that is also Advait Vedanta philosophy in action. When we construct Vriksha Mandirs, that is also Advait Vedanta in action, in practice, not just in theory, not just in philosophy. So in his teachings, he used to highlight that nature, Prakriti, is not just for upasana, Prakriti is for upasana, not just for upyog or upabhog, not just for consumption or not just for utility, but Prakriti is for reverence. So Vriksha Mandirs were created based on arboreal dharma. This is my humble translation from his ideas. Arboreal dharma means what is the dharma of trees? What dharma of trees can inspire humans to become caretaker of the tree, to humans to become reverential towards trees, towards nature, towards ecology, and so on. So a slogan that he gave in Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, his native languages, is Vriksha mein Vasudev. Or in Gujarati, he used to say, Chod ma ran chod, or Paudhe mein Prabhu. That divinity is not just in temples, divinity is not just in sky, divinity is not just in heaven, but divinity is in every tree. So based on that idea, more than 25 tree temples were created across Gujarat. Around 10 million plants were not only planted, but they were taken care of very well, and they actually grew into plants and trees. Not just, some government initiatives, sometimes trees are planted, but they're not properly taken care of, and they do not develop properly. But here, because of the reverential attitude, because of the Vedantic idea, trees actually developed, and green belt actually increased because of these spirituality-based efforts. Then Goras experiment was also developed by Swadhyay, Goras Prayog, which can be called as bovine dharma. What is the dharma of a cow that can inspire humans to become better humans? In turn, humans automatically become better caretaker of the cattle also, or animals in general. In my research, when I asked Swadhyay people that, are you doing this because you are being environmentalist? Do you want to become environmentalist because you are worried about climate change or biodiversity or so on? So every time they denied those motives. They said, we are not environmentalists. We are simply expressing our devotion. Whatever happens to the environment is just a byproduct. We are doing our prayog, we are doing our experiment to express reverence for divinity. We have reverential attitude towards nature, towards the environment. That itself, as a byproduct, if rivers is becoming cleaner, if green belt is increasing, if cattle is being taken care of in a better way, those are just byproducts. We are not environmental. We are simply devotees. We are simply bhaktas. So this is a picture of current Swadhyay leader, who is the daughter of Parnavati Shastri Athavale, who passed away in 2003, and after that, she has been taken care of this parivar. Sorry, 1 second. I thought I'll make it bigger screen. All right, so that's the screen slide that we just finished. Then Arboreal Dharma of Swadhyay. In that, Swadhyay leader, founder Parnavati Shastri Athavale Dadaji, who by the way was awarded Padma Vibhushan by Indian government. Before that, he was given world's biggest religion prize, $1.2 million by Templeton Foundation in New York, in the US and UK. He was also given Magsaysay Award, just for your information. And after that, Indian government also gave him Padma Vibhushan Award, as I mentioned. So in his teachings, he used to highlight reason-based religion. The religion should not just be based on faith, but should be based on rational understanding, because the current generation or the next generations is not going to accept just because we are saying that Vedanta is great or India is great, or it has to be explained in a very rational-based, scientifically based explanation for religion should be given. So what Dadaji explained to the farmers or whoever was listening to him, all his listeners, the way he coined the term, he said that capillary action, we all know in science that capillary action makes the water rise against gravitation in the tree. So the topmost layer of the tree also gets the water that we are giving to the roots. But in addition to capillary action, you also add the force of Krishna attraction. So the word for capillary action in Gujarati or Sanskrit is Kesha Karshan. So he said Kesha Karshan is fine. Science says Kesha Karshan, capillary action, we all know that. But Kesha Karshan ke saath saath, you just add the word Krishna Karshan, Keshava Karshan, Kesha Karshan and Keshava Karshan. So Keshav is also in the trees. So Keshav makes that force possible, that water rises against gravitation and goes to the topmost layer of the tree, and the tree grows very well. So try to identify the Keshav in trees, try to identify Vedantic divinity in trees or plants. And so trees and plants are automatically divine because there is divine force in trees. So if trees are divine, if plants are divine, if we worship the trees, if we create these new tree temples, we are actually creating new temples. So these are temples of God. So Vriksha Mandir. So that is how Vriksha Mandir were developed and maintained for many, many years, and they are still being maintained. So Swadhyay gave me this quotation: one who goes to farms just for work is a farmer, but one who goes to enjoy and respect greenery goes with reverence and gratitude for God. These are all my translations. This reverential perspective inspires to make the entire world green. So this God word is not referring to Christian, Judeo-Abrahamic or Abrahamic God, but it's simply a translation from Bhagwan, that Bhagwan, if we can recognize Bhagwan in trees and plants, and if we have that reverence, then we have the potential to make the entire world green if we keep building such Vriksha Mandirs by one step at a time. So if we recognize the word dharma, so dharma word is used for religions, for spiritual activities. Dharma word is used for physical characteristics of trees. Dharma word is also used for the duty or morality or ethics of Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, or the people who are following these ideas even in today's 21st century. So our moral duties, ethical duties, physical characteristics, and spiritual activities are all covered by the word dharma. So in this intersection of dharma, which comes, by the way, from the root dhri, which means to sustain. So dharma, by definition, by its etymological definition, dharma already includes the notion of sustainability, because dharma word comes from sustaining force. So that is what we see here, that the Bhagavad Gita, which inspired Arjun to do his duty, to do his dharma. The same Bhagavad Gita is also inspiring millions of Swadhyayis to take care of, to do their duty towards nature, to do their duty towards Bhagwan. And by that token, the environmental resources are also being taken care of as a byproduct, as they told me in there when I interviewed them. I'll stop here. If there are any questions, would be happy to take them. And I could have gone on and on, but I know the next speakers are waiting in line, and I can stop here.
Dr. Pankaj, you could go on for spend a few more minutes if required, if you need to continue.
I would love to go if there are questions. If not, I can also speak on another community that I've been working with for a long time. That community is called as the Bishnoi community. Bishnoi community is from my home state of Rajasthan, and they were in the news in the 90s when they caught Salman Khan, and they are still fighting that legal battle against Salman Khan because he tried to kill he did kill a black buck, and the Bishnoi people were on the spot, and they caught him, and the legal battle is still going on. But little was known about Bishnois outside the Bishnoi world before I wrote my book before I did my PhD on the Bishnois and Swadhyayas in 2008, and then my book came in 2010, which focused on the detailed historiography of Bishnoi community, Swadhyaya community, and Bhils of Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh borderline. And so Bishnois have been in existence since 15th century in Rajasthan, when what happened was a massive drought came to Rajasthan, which is a very common occurrence. And in that drought scenario, the founder of Bishnoi community, Guru Jambhoji, saw this problem of destruction of nature, destruction of plants, killing of animals. And in that scenario, he came up with, he had some mystical experience, some kind of an enlightenment. And then he came up with 29 rules that codified, that summarized his teachings, that became the foundation for a new community called the Bishnoi. Bishnoi, by the way, many times is interpreted as Bishnoi 20 and 9. So those 29 rules became the foundation for Bishnoi community across India, mostly focused in Rajasthan, but they're also in Haryana, UP, Madhya Pradesh, and even in Odisha. So 29 rules, and then his teachings were also codified in 120 statements in archaic Rajasthani language in which he spoke. So he also, even though he was not a Sanskrit Pandit as Dadaji was, Pandurang Shastri Athavale, the Swadhyaya founder that I just mentioned in my previous, in my slides, but Jambhoji was also, even though not a Sanskrit scholar, but the message that he gave, the teachings that he taught were all also based on Vedanta, Advait Vedanta, that every particle is divine. Animals are also divine. So you have no right to kill animals just to satisfy your hunger. So Bishnoi people also became vegetarians over the time. And Swadhyaya people, of course, are vegetarians also. And so based on, again, based on the dharmic idea, based on the notion of dharma, it is dharma to take shower every day, to take bath every day. So imagine 15th century Rajasthan, where water is so scarce, every drop is so precious. Even in that scenario, Jambhoji tells his followers to maintain complete hygiene, take shower every day, and do not kill green trees. Imagine 15th century Rajasthan again, and long before climate change or long before biodiversity or global warming kind of words that entered our lingo, that entered our language, 15th century Rajasthan, non-Sanskrit Pandit, non-Pandit Rajasthani person, Rajasthani leader, Jambhoji was also already giving these teachings to his followers. And his followers, ever since he came to Rajasthan, so for last 500 years, they have been sacrificing their own lives in some cases to save their trees, to save their Khejarli trees, especially, which is very divine for them, very sacred for them. Black bucks, Salman Khan story, we already know, but Salman Khan story is just one example. There are dozens and dozens of such examples where they stop outsiders from poaching their animals, killing their, hurting their trees, killing their birds or animals. Bishnois are always at the forefront to save their natural resources, to save their flora and fauna. So these are some of the great examples, and it is easier for, I think, to just interpret Vedanta and philosophy and speak about Vedanta. But when we see these Vedantic examples, experiments in action, in practice, in communities such as Swadhyayas and Bishnois, I think it validates our theory, our philosophy in a much more concrete way. So that is why I think I at least have tried my best to always do interdisciplinary research where philosophy, religious studies, anthropology, history are all intertwined, so that we have solid evidence, pieces of evidence for whatever claims that we make that Vedanta is great. But here are the reasons that is why Vedanta is great, not just philosophically, of course. Philosophy is of course great. I think I'll stop here.